Welcome to English with Zenko Master. Get ready to learn something new today.
My name is Clara. I am 31 years old, and this is the story of how I lost myself in someone else's world. Before I met Lucas, I believed in quiet love. I wanted a simple life with someone kind and honest. I didn't need big romance or dramatic promises. I just wanted a home filled with peace. When I met Lucas, I thought I had finally found that kind of love. He didn't talk much, but he made me feel calm. He seemed careful and respectful. I liked how quiet he was. He didn't try to impress anyone. He simply helped where help was needed. We met at a town shelter after a storm damaged many homes. I had joined a group of volunteers. Lucas was already there, working on a broken window. He had strong hands and a serious face. He worked without stopping, and he didn't say much. But when I handed him a box of nails, he looked at me and smiled. That small moment stayed with me. We started spending more time together. After the work was done, we would sit and talk. Sometimes we didn't talk at all, and that was fine. He told me he had been in the army. He didn't tell me much more. I guessed something painful had happened. I didn't ask questions. I wanted to respect his silence. After a few months, I was spending most weekends at his house. It was small and quiet, full of wooden furniture and soft light. He had built some of the shelves himself. Everything smelled like pine and fresh air. I started to feel at home there, and slowly I moved in. We didn't talk about it. I just brought more clothes, more books, more of my things. We fell into a routine. He made coffee in the morning. I folded laundry while he read. We ate simple dinners. There was nothing exciting, but I thought it was enough. I thought I was happy. Then things began to change. It started with small things. Lucas began checking the locks several times before bed. He closed the curtains tightly, even during the day. Sometimes I woke up and found him standing at the window looking outside. When I asked if something was wrong, he said he was just being careful. He smiled, but his face looked tired. He started listening to a small radio in the hallway. It wasn't on, but he said he was waiting for something. He didn't explain what. He just sat there for hours, holding it. Later, he told me he had heard a voice. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to believe he was just stressed. I told myself it was nothing serious. But over time, the strange moments grew stronger. One day, he stood in the cold garden without shoes or a coat. He stared at the sky and didn't answer when I spoke. Another night, he said someone was trying to watch us through the walls. I tried to calm him down. He said he was keeping us safe. He began staying awake all night. He walked through the house, checking doors and windows. I started to feel nervous around him. He was still kind to me, but something felt different. Sometimes he would look at me like he didn't know who I was. Other times, he held my hand and told me to trust him, even if I didn't understand. One night, I found an old medicine bottle in a drawer. It had Lucas's name on it, but the label was faded. I didn't know what the medicine was for. I searched online and discovered it was for a mental condition. I didn't know what to do. I felt scared and confused. The next day, I called a number I found in his wallet. It belonged to his brother. I had never spoken to him before. I told him what had been happening. He was quiet for a moment. Then he asked if Lucas had stopped taking his medicine. I said I didn't know. He said Lucas had a long history of problems. When he stopped treatment, he often became lost in his own thoughts. I sat in the dark that night, thinking about everything. I still loved Lucas, but I was also afraid. I didn't know how to help him. I didn't know if he wanted help. He never told me about his condition. He kept it a secret from me. When I tried to talk to him, he became cold. He said I was working with the people who were trying to control him. He said I was not safe anymore. I tried to explain that I cared, that I wanted to help, but he didn't believe me. Then something happened that I couldn't ignore. That night, after I came out of the bathroom, I found the bedroom door locked. I turned the handle, but it wouldn't move. I called his name and he answered from the other side. He said I had to stay in the room for a while. He said the voices had warned him that it wasn't safe for me to leave. I sat on the bed, shaking. I waited for hours. When he finally opened the door in the morning, I walked past him without speaking. I picked up my bag and left the house. I didn't take anything else. I just left. I didn't look back. Before I share the rest of my story, I need to know, where are you listening from? Knowing someone hears me, understands me, gives me strength. After I left Lucas, I went to stay with my cousin for a few days. Her name is Layla, and she lives in the city. We weren't very close before, but when I called her, she told me to come right away. She didn't ask many questions. She just gave me the spare key and said I could stay as long as I needed. I was thankful for that. I didn't have the strength to explain everything yet. Those first days were quiet. I slept a lot, but it wasn't peaceful sleep. I often woke up with fear in my chest, unsure of where I was. Sometimes I thought I heard Lucas walking down the hall, but it was only the sound of Layla's cat. Even small noises made my heart race. Layla was kind. She brought me tea and tried not to push me. When I was ready to talk, I told her what had happened. I didn't tell her everything at once, just small pieces. At first, she was shocked. Then she grew quiet. She said she was glad I left when I did. She said she had noticed something strange about Lucas the one time she met him. I started looking for work in the city. I wanted something part-time, something quiet. I found a small job at a bookstore not far from Layla's apartment. The manager was friendly, and the hours were short. The place smelled like old paper and coffee. It felt safe. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. I didn't hear from Lucas. Not at first. I had blocked his number. I deleted my social media accounts. I was afraid he would find me, but part of me also wondered if he was okay. That was the hard part. I still cared about him, even after everything. Love doesn't turn off like a switch. Sometimes I hated myself for missing him. Other times, I felt guilty for leaving. One afternoon, while I was arranging books, I saw someone who looked like him outside the store. My whole body froze. I stopped breathing. But when the man turned around, it wasn't Lucas. I felt silly for being so scared, but the fear stayed with me for hours. At night, I began writing in a notebook. I wrote down what had happened, every detail I could remember. I thought it might help me understand things better. I wanted to know why I had stayed so long, even after the warning signs. I wanted to know how I had lost my own voice inside that house. Writing helped. Slowly, I began to feel stronger. I remembered who I was before Lucas. I used to laugh more. I used to make plans for the future. I used to feel sure about my choices. I missed that version of myself. One evening, Layla and I went for a walk in the park. It was early spring, and the air was still cold. She asked me if I had thought about therapy. I told her I wasn't ready. She nodded. Then she said something that stayed with me. She said, "You were strong enough to leave. That means you're strong enough to heal." After that night, I started doing small things to take care of myself. I cooked dinner once a week. I started reading again. I called an old friend and told her where I was. I didn't talk about Lucas, but it felt good to hear a familiar voice. Each small step felt like a part of me was coming back. Then, one morning, I received a letter. It didn't have a name on the envelope. Inside, there was a short note. It said only this: "I'm sorry. I hope you're okay." There was no signature, but I knew who it was from. I stared at the paper for a long time. I didn't know how to feel. Part of me was angry. Part of me wanted to cry. And part of me still missed him. I folded the letter and put it away. I didn't write back. I didn't want to open that door again. A few weeks later, I learned through Ben that Lucas had been admitted to a hospital. He was getting treatment again. He was safe. That was all I needed to know. I didn't ask for more. Months passed. I moved into a small apartment of my own. It wasn't big, but it was mine. I painted the walls soft green and bought new bed sheets. I kept fresh flowers by the window. The light came in every morning, and I started to feel okay waking up alone. One day, I went to a cafe near my bookstore. It was quiet, with soft music playing in the background. A man sat at the table next to mine, reading a book I had loved years ago. We started talking. His name was Elias. He was warm and kind, with a gentle way of speaking. He didn't ask too many questions. He didn't rush me. We talked about books, coffee, and how the city felt in spring. We met again the next week. Then again. I didn't tell him about Lucas, not right away. I didn't want my past to define me, but I also promised myself I would never hide again. So one day, when we were walking home, I told him I had been in a relationship that hurt me. I told him I had stayed too long and left too late. I told him I was still learning how to feel safe. He didn't say anything at first. Then he said, "Thank you for trusting me." That was enough. I don't know what the future holds. I still have days when I feel afraid. Sometimes I wake up from dreams I can't explain. But I am learning to trust myself again. I am learning to breathe in silence without fear. Most of all, I am learning that leaving was not weakness. It was the start of something new. Part of healing, I've learned, is being able to tell your story without shaking. It doesn't mean you've forgotten. It means you've survived. That was the lesson I held on to as the seasons changed. Life didn't go back to the way it was before Lucas, but it didn't have to. I wasn't trying to return to the old me. I was trying to become someone new, someone stronger, someone who had faced something dark and made it out the other side. That summer, I continued working at the bookstore. I also started volunteering at a local center for women. It was quiet work, sorting clothes, organizing food shelves, sometimes cleaning, but it helped me feel useful. Many of the women who came in were going through hard things. Some were afraid. Some had left homes like I did. We didn't always speak much, but when we looked at each other, there was a kind of silent understanding. Being in that space helped me feel less alone. I no longer felt like my story was strange or shameful. I realized that many people go through things they never talk about. They carry pain in their pockets and fear in their bed sheets. And like me, they still wake up every day and try again. I started therapy a few months later. It took time to feel ready, but I'm glad I went. My therapist was gentle and calm. She never pushed too hard. She listened and waited. In that small room, I said things I had never said out loud. I spoke about the fear, the guilt, the sadness, and the strange love that stayed with me long after I left. One thing she told me stayed in my mind. She said, "You don't have to hate someone to leave them, and you don't have to stop loving someone to protect yourself." That sentence helped me breathe more freely. I had always felt confused about my feelings for Lucas. I knew what he did was not okay. I knew locking someone in a room, listening to voices, and refusing help was dangerous. But I also remembered his quiet smile, his kindness, his hands building a shelf for my books. I had loved him. Maybe in some way, I still did. But love isn't always safe. And staying in pain is not proof of loyalty. With each session, I learned to hold two truths at once. Lucas was not evil. He was ill. And I had done the right thing by leaving. Both of those things could be true. My days slowly became more peaceful. I still had moments of fear, like when a door slammed too loudly or a stranger stared too long, but they didn't control me anymore. I was no longer living inside a storm. I was learning how to live in stillness. Elias continued to be a gentle presence in my life. We didn't rush things. He respected my space and never made me feel guilty for needing time. He brought me books he thought I would like, and sometimes he left little notes between the pages. We walked through parks, visited museums, and talked about the small things. I never felt afraid around him. That was something new for me, feeling safe in quiet moments, not because someone was protecting me, but because I had learned to protect myself. One evening, as we walked near the lake, Elias asked me what I wanted next in life. I didn't have a full answer. I told him I wanted to keep growing. I wanted to be useful. I wanted to do work that helped people. I didn't care about money or success. I just wanted peace. He smiled and said that sounded like a good plan. Later that night, I thought more about that question. What did I want? What would life look like if I could choose freely, without fear? I began to dream again. Not big dreams, but gentle ones. I dreamed of maybe starting a small program at the Women's Center, one that helps women write their own stories. I thought about creating a quiet space where people could come, drink tea, and share what they had been through. Not for therapy, not for advice, just for listening. Because sometimes being heard is the first step to healing. I wrote a proposal and shared it with the center's director. She loved the idea. A few weeks later, we set up the program. We called it Quiet Voices. It was simple. Once a week, a group of women gathered in a small room. We had notebooks, pens, and soft music in the background. We wrote in silence for a while, then read aloud if we wanted. There were no rules, no pressure, just space. The first time I shared my story out loud, my hands were shaking. But the women in the room didn't look at me with pity. They looked at me with respect. One woman reached out and held my hand. She said, "Thank you." That was brave. I didn't cry that night, but I did cry later, alone in my room. Not because I was sad, because I felt proud. I had turned something painful into something meaningful. My story was no longer a secret I carried alone. It had become a light for someone else. Elias came to one of the center's small events a few months later. He met some of the women and listened as we shared poems and small pieces of writing. Afterward, he told me he was proud of me. I believed him. I felt proud of myself, too. Around that time, I received a second letter. Like the first, it had no name. The handwriting was familiar. The words were softer this time. They spoke about regret and change. They said thank you for the time we had shared and apologized again for the harm. The letter ended with a wish that I live a good life, full of calm and light. I didn't write back. I didn't need to. But I no longer felt afraid. I folded the letter and placed it inside my notebook, between pages I had written about forgiveness. That fall, I moved into a new apartment. It had bigger windows and more plants. I painted one wall light yellow. On another, I hung a photo of the lake where Elias and I liked to walk. The space felt like mine. Every time I opened the door, I felt a sense of peace. It was not perfect, but it was safe. One morning, I stood by the window with my tea and watched the leaves fall. I thought about where I had been 1 year earlier. I thought about the girl who sat on a bed behind a locked door, scared and unsure of how she would ever get out. I wanted to tell her something. I wanted to tell her she was going to be okay. I wanted to tell her she would cry, but she would laugh again too. I wanted to tell her she would feel lost, but she would find herself again, stronger, wiser, and no longer afraid. Most of all, I wanted to tell her that walking away was not failure. It was courage. It was the beginning of everything new. Sometimes I still think about Lucas. I hope he is getting the help he needs. I hope he is safe. I no longer carry anger. I carry understanding, but I do not carry the burden of his illness anymore. That weight is not mine to hold. Elias and I are still together. Our love is slow and kind. We talk about the future sometimes, but there is no pressure. We are taking things one season at a time. We both know that healing doesn't follow a straight line. Some days are easy. Some days are not. But now, I face them with someone who listens, who waits, who never makes me feel small. Looking back, I don't see a story of failure or shame. I see a journey. I see a woman who walked into a storm, stayed longer than she should have, but found the strength to walk out. I see someone who learned to listen to her own voice, even when it was shaking. If you are listening to this, and you have ever felt lost inside someone else's world, I want you to know that you are not alone. You are not weak for staying. You are not selfish for leaving. And you are not broken. You are simply human. And humans can grow. Even after deep pain. Even after fear. I once thought love meant never leaving. But now I understand something different. Real, deep, quiet love starts with yourself. It begins with knowing when something is hurting you. It begins with walking away. It begins with choosing peace. And if you are still inside the storm, please believe me when I say this. There is life on the other side, and it is waiting for you. If you liked my story, please like, comment, and share. More simple and emotional stories are coming soon.